All right. Okay, let's see, I just want to make sure. Yes, it's working. Perfect. Okay, good. All right, so this way I'm able to see the chat box in Facebook. And now so if anyone decides that they have questions or they'd like to have a conversation with us, we can see that in the feed and respond to it live.
And that's the thing that we're looking at on the right-hand side, right?
Yeah, so on the right-hand side of your screen, you might be able to see it. It says load Facebook chat to interact with your audience.
Got it.
So when I hit load, what happens is another screen opens up to my right and I can see my us on Facebook.
Okay.
And then I can see the comments coming in.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Any questions or last minute things you want to check in before we launch into our vidya?
I don't think so. I'm realizing that I might need to mute my incoming mailbox. Close it out. Okay.
Good call. Just turned off my phone.
My phone's always on fire.
All right. Yeah. All right. So it is 2:00 on the dot. So we will get started. So I am just going to introduce myself first. My name is Brianna McWilliam. I am the creator and moderator for this group, Healing Attachment Wounds. And I am so thrilled and excited to have the lovely Missy Hall here. Missy happens to be a participant in another group that I run called the Abundant Healer Program. And she's been putting together just an amazing program having to do with attachment and music therapy and how she's bringing those things together. And so she was so gracious in being willing to come and talk a little bit about that with us here on the feed. And so for anyone that's joining us, I would invite you to put your name in the comments below and where you're coming from. And we can give you a little shout out on the call. And also, if you have questions, please feel free to just type them in the comments below. We are able to see them and ideally be able to respond to them live as well. So just in general, Missy, I'm going to hand it over to you just to introduce yourself. If you could just give us a little bit of background of your experience and maybe what brought you to music therapy and then looking at music therapy with attachment specifically.
Sure. So hi, everyone. My name is Missy Hall. I'm a licensed creative arts therapist and certified board music therapist. And I practice here in New York City. So I've been working with children and families for approximately almost 22 years now. And my specialty is really working with infants and caregivers and helping caregivers sort of learn how to attune better to their infants. That being said, one of the things that I've really been excited about is being able to translate this idea of attunement to an adult population, because it's something that as music therapists, we work with very closely. I think it's something that's very familiar to many music therapists. But I think to the greater public at large, it's such a handy, useful tool. And it's a very simple way to be able to either develop more compatible relationships in your life or change the pattern and relationships in your life. So.
And just if you could maybe give us your own definition of attunement, like what does attunement even mean?
Sure. So attunement is defined as a sympathetic relationship. So that's the dictionary definition. It's a harmonic or compatible relationship. So being able to attune to someone is being able to bring your relationship into harmony. So the idea of attunement is that if you are able to have a more compatible relationship with your own music, which I'll speak a little bit about, then you have a sense of who and what your music sounds like in the world. And then you might be able to enter into a musical relationship with someone else that might be more harmonic, unless you want a very discordant relationship, and then you could absolutely make that well. bi-directional. So it's something that's always changing and evolving. But breaking the way that we are in the world down into musical elements, I think gives us a broader perspective of things. It depersonalizes it a little bit so that when you come back to it, you're able to see it as something very pragmatic. You know, if I'm always anxious and my tempo is always at this pace and I really want to be able to slow down, just slowing the phrasing of my breath down can sort of help me be different in my rhythm and my tempo. And that might change the relationships around me.
Is there like, so what comes up for me is what you were saying about your own music and like being in touch, let's say, with your own like harmony or discordance initially, and then that helps you harmonize with another partner. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, you had kind of given an example about like it was sort of like your body was kind of tight, and then like you sort of had a higher voice, and like there was a faster sort of tempo into the way that you were talking. Right. And I'm wondering if there kind of like an exercise that, because there's something very bodily and physical about what you are expressing. And I'm wondering, is there like a kind of basic exercise? You had mentioned breath. Is there something else like that would help someone, like if someone were to incorporate it into their morning ritual, for example, or into a daily practice? Is there like an exercise that would help with that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just reflecting on the way that I sort of use this technique for myself. I use it more moment to moment. So I'm not necessarily thinking about a practice that I do consistently over time, although I am thinking that the idea of shifting or changing your sort of habitual musical elements consistently can help you shift and change habitual patterns. So the idea, actually, I can give you a very concrete example as a musician, and then we'll see if we can tease it out and translate it into something you can do every day. So right before this webinar, I was working with a song. It's Joni Mitchell's Both Sides Now. So it's about perspective, right? It's about seeing things from both sides. So I'm playing the song, and I have a tablature on my phone that sort of plays the chords so that I can follow it. And the tablature was going very, very fast. So I started playing fast so that I could match the song to the way that the tablature was unfolding. But I started to become very anxious. And I was like, I can slow the tablature down so that I can slow my own self down. So this principle of entrainment that we use in music, which is just synchronization, is we can look outside of ourselves and see the things that we're just intuitively or habitually entraining to. So, you know, maybe I'm rushing to get to the subway, and in my mind there are these racing thoughts, and so I might want to pay attention to the thoughts and maybe slow them down, and that might slow my pattern down. Or maybe there's a sound in our environment that's just so intrusive, and by really isolating the sound and recognizing it, and maybe even something as simple as a car alarm, you know, that's a very intrusive
I know that one.
tone. It's a very intrusive timbre, and it's a very intrusive rhythm and tempo. And
we're very familiar with that one here in Manhattan. Both Missy and I live in Manhattan. We're very familiar with that one.
You know, you can notice, oh my gosh, my breathing is ha, ha, ha. Right? So maybe I can just take a moment and do a little deep breathing and maybe shift the phrasing of my breathing a little bit so that I'm coming back to myself. So the idea is that you're always coming back to honoring your own musical elements. So that then as you are out in the world, A, you're more authentic with yourself and your own musical elements, but B, maybe you're either not susceptible to falling into other people's patterns, or maybe you're able to change an internal pattern and have a different relationship. It's very meta, I know, but...
No, I love it. But so let's make that like concrete. So like, when you say musical elements, can you give us an example? Like, what would be your musical elements?
Sure. So, and excuse me, my cat has decided she wants to have her 15 minutes of fame. There we go, Max. Yes. So when we're talking about musical elements, it's very simplified. So we're looking at tempo. What is the timing? How quick? How slow? We're looking at rhythm. What is the time signature? In other words, is it very rocking, like a 3/4 time, or is it more steady, like a 4/4 time? We're looking at dynamic. How loud or soft is that? Timbre, we're looking at the voicing of something. Piano sounds very different than a string instrument. That's the voicing of the instrument. And as musical beings, we all have very unique voices. So our timbre is very different than one another. So rhythm, tempo, dynamic, timbre, those are kind of the biggies. Yeah.
And you know what's coming up for me as you're talking about these things. So I'm imagining like situations that lovers get into in which these things might play out and have a dynamism, right? So let's say you have a partner who's kind of soft-spoken and maybe they're a little bit slower in the way that they communicate. And then with a partner who has got a loud kind of booming voice that sort of demands attention and like, you know, walks into the room and their energy just swallows it up, right?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Oh, well, so I was just thinking, I mean, it's such a great example of musical relationships is the same as attachment relationships. So in an anxious avoidant dynamic, right, we have these two counterparts to one another that are constantly, for lack of a better word, riffing off of one another. In order to have an experience to be anxious, maybe you need that avoidant personality, right? So maybe your musical relationship with someone is that maybe you are very quiet and timid, and maybe they are very boisterous. And so that relationship either gives you a chance to be a little louder, to come to where they are, to meet them a little bit more, to fill in the space, or maybe you just recede even more, and that satisfies some sort of unconscious dynamic that is going on, right? The greatest example I can give is I work in acute care pediatrics, and I had a parent, and we were just kind of talking about, you know, when to come by the room and work with the patient, and the parent was extremely brusque and just very dismissive. And so I walked away from the encounter feeling, you know, hurt and angry and shameful. And you know, I just didn't feel good about it. And I thought, you know, let's break down his music. His music was very staccato. He was just very, yes, no, I know that already. I know, no, you don't need to talk to me. That. And it was also very quick. And I was much slower in trying to explain or describe the work that I do. And so it gave me a moment to realize it wasn't personal. This is his music. And so when working with him, he wants yes, no answers. He wants to be quick. He wants it to be brief and in and out. And so my interactions with him shifted over time to be able to kind of meet him in that place. Therefore, he wasn't as frustrated because I was too slow and I wasn't catching up with him. And I wasn't hurt. I was able to recognize, dude, you don't go at my pace. Like, this is just not my natural, right? Right. But that relationship shifted. And then as a result of that, you know, I was able to work with the patient in a way that really honored the whole family, if that makes sense. And so we translate that to our adult relationships. And I'm in an argument with my partner, and my partner is like way up here energetically, and their tempo is revved up, and they're really big and dynamic. And I'm getting smaller and smaller and smaller. It's an opportunity for me to take a moment and step into a different musical relationship with them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, what's interesting, what's coming up for me is like how differently we respond, particularly in like conflictual relationships. And like, so for example, I remember having a conversation with my sister, and we were talking about this hypothetical scenario where, let's say it's a male-female heterosexual relationship. The woman is in the kitchen and she's stressed about something, and it's probably not related to like chores or anything like that. But then let's say her partner comes home and it lays into him like the second he walks in the door, like, you never take out the garbage, the kitchen's a mess. What, you know, you just do this because you don't respect me and you don't respect this relationship and our space and blah, 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 blah. And she just like lays into him. And it has nothing to do with, probably whatever it is that's actually upsetting her has nothing to do with the garbage. And there's like a couple of ways that he could respond in that scenario where it's like, Why do you have to lay into me the second I get home? I've just walked in the door, aside which it's not true. We've wrote it right down on the calendar, whose job it is to take out the garbage, blah, blah, blah. So he could like meet her there. Or he could like, this is something else that I have learned in my studies about how to kind of break through those sort of projected kind of things that happen, is like take a step towards her and like touch her arm and be like, is this really about the garbage? Like, are you okay? Is this really about the garbage? Because you know that you and this relationship are my priority. And if it is about the garbage, that's a small thing. We can make that happen. But if it's about something else, I want you to know I'm here for you.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh my God, I'd melt. And my sister's like, I would find that patronizing. and I was like, you would. And then I realized that it was because she was itching for a fight. She wasn't looking for a way to release that. She wanted to hold on to it. And she wanted someone that would like meet her in that place. Right. And in that moment, I was like, well, because in that moment, you're not actually willing to take responsibility for what you're feeling. You're just wanting to shove it off onto someone else. And like, and it's I can understand wanting someone to understand how you feel. And sometimes we feel better if we're feeling crappy, we feel better when someone else feels crappy with us. But yes. that's like blaring your horn over someone else's violin, right?
Well, I think you even have to look at it from a broader perspective of, again, I'm always speaking about how music is an extension of who we are in the world, right? It's an extension of myself. And so when you're talking about, maybe someone who's itching for a fight, and that was the experience that she wanted to have, we're looking at her musical style in the world. In other words, there's a reason some people love Wagner, and there's a reason some people love Mozart, and there's a reason some people hate classical music and like heavy metal. So it's because those musical elements are, in essence, closer aligned to the way that they like to express themselves and relate in the world. So the idea of I'm itching for a fight is I want that discordant, like messy, sloppy, tonal interaction that maybe doesn't resolve on a note that feels good. Yeah. Or maybe
it's true. Like even my saying that's not taking ownership of your feelings is kind of a judgment, right? Like, right. And like you're kind of saying, well, maybe that's just the way that their tone is. Like maybe that's just their vibration, right?
Right. And believe me, I'm not minimizing any of our true thoughts and feelings, and all of these things are extremely valuable and valid. They're 100% valid. But attuning is essentially, it's just a pragmatic technique to sort of recognize, all right, who am I kind of in the world? What are other people hearing and seeing? And then what am I seeing and hearing from others? And then I broke an attunement down into, what is their affect? What is their tempo? What is their timing? And so this word is just a quick checklist of those basic elements of either something that isn't working for me in the moment, or maybe something that isn't working with another. Because the idea of music is, and this is where it comes into therapy, is that it's all in relationship to one another, right? Donna Winnicott said there is no such thing as a baby. It's always a baby in someone. And that's true of us in the world. There is no such thing as just the self. It's always the self in relation to others. And that's the exact same principle of music. In other words, if I am, and this, I'm going to totally nerd out, but just let me nerd out for a second.
This is me. Let's nerd that out.
So in music, each note has a relationship to the other note. So if we're starting on what we call the home tone, which is the key signature that whatever's written in, the first note in relation to the third note has a very different relationship than the first note in relationship to the fifth note, right? Mm-hmm. So the idea is that someone else's notes, someone else's music actually starts to determine the quality of your music just in relationship with it. In other words, if I'm playing the key of C and someone comes in and they're in the key of D, there's dissonance there, right? And so at C, there's no dissonance. But in relationship to someone else, suddenly it changes, right? Yeah.
And what's interesting is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't it that it seems to me that notes tend to move towards harmony, like that. And I've noticed this. So just to give you an example,
Okay.
I went to like a new moon ceremony on Thursday, and it started off with a tobacco ceremony where it was like a tobacco ceremony where you set an intention and you do a meditation and they blow smoke up your nose, literally, and it goes straight to like your cranium, and then you feel like this. It's not like getting high, it's just like smoking tobacco, but it's like you get this sense of like expansion, like right near in your pineal gland.
Mm-hmm.
And afterwards they were playing a drum and a accordion, and I don't know the name of it, but it was like a xylophone,
Oh,
and one of the individuals was singing, like, but without words, just like ah, like that kind of singing. And it was like just spontaneously, everyone in the room started doing that as well. And it was so harmonious. And it was like, and if you heard someone kind of out of tune, they like shifted to match whatever the tonal vibration was. And not everybody was singing the same note, but it was like it all sounded so beautiful.
mm-hmm.
And it was so interesting.
You've nailed it. That's the basic premise of all music therapy, is the principle of entrainment, which is that when two vibratory bodies, it's a physics principle, vibratory bodies are vibrating, and they come in close enough proximity to one another, they fall into the same vibration. So if a tone is struck, our tone actually naturally wants to entrain to that sound. That being said, there are some sounds, and I'm speaking in a grander metaphorical way, that just don't harmonize with us or don't sync up with us. And so we find ourselves in the areas where we get kind of stuck. Sometimes it's a function of this tone just doesn't resonate with me, again, metaphorically. But it's also a very useful way to think of it if you think of it literally, you know. Tone, this sound that I am in the world is not in training, not matching up with these other sounds.
And like, let's say I'm someone who knows like nothing about music therapy, and I think I'm tone deaf, and I don't know how to play an instrument, and I don't know anything. But like, what would be a way for me to try to get in touch with my own like sound? Like, I guess I'm almost thinking of toning as an exercise, but is there like a practical thing that maybe you and I could even just do together on this call that would give someone like a basic tool to help getting in touch with their own vibration?
For sure. I mean, there's something very simple that you can do with someone in a room, and I think you and I could try it, is just breathing together.
Okay.
That's a simple one, but sometimes it can be really challenging. If you're looking for more tonality, yeah, we could tone together.
Okay.
I think many people find that a bit intimidating. So,
well, they're not here. It's you and me.
But breathing is again, it's such a great way to sort of honor your own space initially, because you have to attune to what your natural breath is. That's your natural rhythm, phrasing. But then joining in someone else in breathing, then it shifts and changes, and it can be a very sort of intimate experience, but also very liberating. Yeah. Yeah.
Let's do it. How do we do this? Let's do it.
All right. So first, I'm just going to invite you to close your eyes. We'll close our eyes. And we'll just take 3 deep breaths, whatever pace works for us. Just to sort of erase where we are in this presentation and just kind of come back to ourselves. And then just to take a moment just to sort of just observe your own breath, not trying to alter or change it. And for those of you that aren't particularly well versed in this practice, when we're talking about observation, we're kind of observing the elements of how fast is it, how long is the breath, is it very shallow or is it very deep? Where are we breathing in our bodies? Are we feeling it, upper in the chest or down in the belly or somewhere in between? Are we noticing that we're not breathing at all? Are we noticing that we're trying to change our breath just because we're paying attention to it? All those things. And then you can go ahead and open your eyes. And as you're breathing, you can just sort of observe the person that you're working with, or next to, and what their breathing is like. And now, so you were inward, now you're going to let go of your inward attention and put your attention just on them and their breath. And as you're doing that, you can sort of observe how different or similar that breath is to where you were before.
I find myself breathing more deeply.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I found myself holding my breath a little bit because it is such an intimate thing. There's a moment of it feels almost initially a little intrusive, but over time it actually starts to feel very comfortable. And again, this is a great metaphor for relationships in general, right? Initially, we're checking each other out and trying to figure out what it's all about and try not to freak out. And I don't want to lose my own sense of breath, but, I have to be there for someone else. And eventually that entrainment where you start to come together starts to become that symbiosis, right? Of being able to really breathe together.
Yeah.
And so that's
your life force.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Quite literally,
Yeah. And that's where we come into, as music therapists, we're always talking about the 3 elements in the room. I think in art you have a very similar perspective. But my music is an extension of who I am in the world. The way that I respond to your music is an experience of who I am in relationship to others. But then our music together, that's its own unique thing. And that's where we change and grow. Because, again, it's the relationship of our music that is a whole different new thing. Suddenly, it's a different style.
Right? Yeah. I like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So.
Well, thank you. I am mindful that we're just about at 30 minutes, and I know I told you it'd be about 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. But wow, I really love that. I want to use that. And I mean, I think I'll also use that just being more mindful of my own breath even, and connecting in with that. Because one of the things I did notice is when we started that a lot of my breath was right here. And it was, and I would breathe out and there'd be kind of a long pause before I breathe in again. Yeah. But as and I think you had said, as we start to attend to it, we inevitably change it or we might inevitably change it. And I think I did. I started once, we started attending to that. I felt the lower part of my diaphragm sort of I was like, oh, it open up a little bit.
Exactly.
And then when I was paying attention to your breath, I saw you take a deeper breath and I was like, that would feel good. And it's just yeah, that does feel good. So yeah, I love that exercise.
Yeah. And that's where attunement comes in, because as you and I are relating and I'm observing your breath, intuitively I get a sense of I need more breath, right? And that's where we speak of therapy, heat transference, countertransference. But that act of wanting to honor something that I felt that you needed also, gave me permission to give myself that thing. And then we joined together in something that was nourished. I felt nourished by it.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Thank you. And I just also, if is there anything you want to share with the group? Or Missy also has a group that she's starting as well on Facebook, and I can get that information from you and post it in the caption for later. But if there's anything that you wanted to share with group, I just wanted to give you the floor for that.
I would just invite you this week to listen a little differently. Start listening to all of the tones and timbres and dynamics in the world, and then recognizing how they may or may not be impacting or affecting you. Whether it's a person's music or something external. Again, car alarm is a great example, but just observe it. You don't have to change it or do anything, but it's such an interesting exercise to start listening differently, I think. And it opens up a perspective that gives you space for understanding or seeing things differently.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. And I just want to say thank you to anyone that has joined us here on the call. And if there are any questions or anything, I'm going to invite people to comment in the thread below. And I may inquire with Missy, later on if you'd be willing to respond to them as time goes on and as more people watch the video. And also, if you're interested in learning more about music therapy, or you want to learn more about Missy and her practice and the amazing, awesome, cool stuff that she is putting together for her online presence and business, definitely you can leave a comment below as well. I'm going to be posting some ways to contact her and to join her Facebook group in the feed and in the caption. So make sure you come back and check that out.
Okay. Thanks for your time, Brianna.
Yeah.